Mike Damergis with Rick Cerrone, the editor-in-chief of Baseball Digest and former New York Yankees PR Director. And Rick, it's hard to believe, but we're coming up on 40 years since the Yankees lost Thurman Munson, former catcher, MVP, Rookie of the Year, in that fatal plane crash on August 2nd, 1979. It was a fatality that affected this team for decades, as you know.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny that it's 40 years because I remember it like it was a year ago. I guess things like that never leave you. But at the time, I was also editor of a magazine. I was editor of my own magazine, which at the time was called Baseball Magazine. And I had a number of interactions in the 2 or 3 years before that I was involved were around the Yankees with Thurman. So, you know, I knew him. And it really hit hard.
And the Yankees at that time, they won the World Series in 77, 78, and Munson was talking at times that he wanted to kind of maybe go back to Ohio and be with his family more. And when this happened, I think back, I was 10, 11 years old in baseball camp, and my coach came up to me and he knew I was a Yankee fan. He put his arms around me and told me what happened. And I remember sitting watching that game against the Orioles after his death, after the funeral, and it was surreal to see that, you know, Thurman Munson, the rugged captain of the Yankees, was gone.
Well, let me take you back a few days before that and set it up that 1979 was a horrible year for the Yankees. Before this, they were double-digit games behind the Orioles, who went on to the World Series that year. And I don't know if you recall this, but they had a Wednesday night game in Chicago against the White Sox, which would be the last game that Thurman Munson ever played. And his knees were bad. There was a lot of talk about him going back to Cleveland. So the first thing is that in his last game ever in the major leagues, he played first base. He started at first base. He came out of the game early. He walked and then he struck out, and then Jim Spencer replaced him at first base. I don't recall the reason why he came out of the game. But on that Thursday, when the news came, that Thursday afternoon, I was with a colleague of mine, Mike Aronstein. We were leaving the office and heading back to our homes, and we were in the car for some reason. I guess we carpooled that day. To the office in Peekskill, and we were listening to the old news station, and I remember distinctly whoever was doing the newscast, maybe it was Spencer Ross, I don't recall, but he said the words, "It's official. Thurman Munson, the captain of the New York Yankees, has been," and in that brief second, the word traded came into my mind. And then the word was killed. Has been killed, and I think Mike almost drove the car off the road. That's how horrific the news was, and I remember exactly where the car was on Route 202 in between Peekskill and Yorktown Heights the moment I heard that news.
It's funny, in these tragic events, these big moments in history, people might say, okay, this was a baseball player, this wasn't JFK, but if you were a baseball fan, you knew where you were at this time. And take us to that game against the Orioles that night. I remember Reggie Jackson sobbing in the outfield.
Yeah.
Jerry Narron would be the catcher behind home plate, and home plate was left empty to honor Thurman as
right. Well, that was very dramatic. That was very dramatic and surreal, and I hand it to the Yankees for thinking of that. But I went to that game. But before I went to the game, that morning I decided that Baseball Magazine needed to do something to honor Thurman. So I went to a local florist and I got this really large, kind of funeral-ish floral display. And I remember parking my car on whatever this 155th Street where they had the press parking on the street. I took the flowers out and I walked by throngs of people at the press gate with the flowers, and everybody thought, here's the floral delivery boy. Brought him in and I took it down to the clubhouse, and the clubhouse attendant, whose name I believe was Sal, said the clubhouse is closed. And I said, could you get someone to take these flowers? And Mickey Morabito, the PR director, came out, took the flowers, And then when the clubhouse opened, excuse me, after the game, they were in his locker. And players to this day, when they're interviewed, so many of them will mention, I remember the flowers in his locker. Well, those flowers came from Baseball Magazine, and I'm really glad we did that because it was the only thing in the locker at the time. They had emptied out his locker, and this floral display was on the floor. I'm really, looking back, I'm very pleased that I did that. So the funny thing is, not funny, but people confuse when they talk about the game after the tragic accident. They kind of combine the first game and the fourth game. It was a 4-game series, so there were games Friday night, Saturday and Sunday afternoon.
I have no recollection of that.
And Monday night.
The
Mercer game was Monday night.
Okay.
It wasn't the game with Jerry Narron. And I've heard people that were there, players, give interviews. Well, we started with the empty home plate and ended with Bobby Mercer hitting the home run. That's not how it happened. Friday night was the first game back. It was inconceivable to me that they played that game. Now, I think today they probably would have canceled the game. They did that recently for Tyler Skaggs, but the Yankees played that night, which surprised me even then. And the ballpark, from the clubhouses, the Yankee clubhouse was closed, the Orioles was not, but the Orioles clubhouse was like a funeral, like a wake. I remember walking in there and seeing, Eddie Murray and Ken Singleton and, I want to say Frank Robinson, and it was just very, very quiet. Nobody said a word. And then they had the ceremony, and Reggie was sobbing in right field. The empty home plate, which Jerry Narron would later come out and be the catcher, the first catcher after Thurman's passing, and then Brad Goulden came in for Narron later in that game, and they lost that game 1-0. But it was funny, the Orioles only got 2 hits off of Louis Tiant in 8 innings, and one of them was a home run by John Lowenstein. The Yankees got 6 or 8 hits, but they didn't score, and I can't even imagine how they could focus, but they lost 1-0. They lost again the next day, Saturday, and then they won on Sunday, which kind of surprised me that they rallied and won the game. And then came Monday night.
And you talk about Munson, and you talk about the locker room, having the flowers in the locker room there. The Yankees kept that locker room empty until the stadium closed in 2008.
The locker, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
The locker.
Yeah.
Talk about through the years how Jeter had his locker next to Munson's, and the players that came after Munson really honored that locker.
I won't say the name. I'm sure somebody could find it out. But we had an Old Timers Day one year, and for many years the old timers would share lockers with the players. Like Hank Bauer would couple with Paul O'Neill, and Moose Skowron would couple with whoever, Posada, whatever. And one player, I didn't really like the idea that he was packed in with a current player, so he decided to take his stuff and put it in Thurman's locker. I don't think he's been seen at Old Timers Day for quite a while, but it was like a shrine. And but you go back to the Monday night, which is the real improbable, like you really think somebody had a hand in this. So the team goes that Monday to Canton, Ohio for the funeral. And George Steinbrenner tells Commissioner Bowie Kuhn, like, if we don't get back, we don't get back. We'll forfeit. We don't care. Because there was some sentiment that, well, let's go from the funeral to the airport. We got to get back. And he said, no, we're going all the way with our captain. And they went to the cemetery, which took more time. But they did get back in time for the game. And Bobby Mercer, who was a real close friend with Thurman, he gave one of the eulogies. And you'd think that Bobby nobody anticipated that Mercer was going to play that night. They were facing a left-hander in Dennis Martinez, and Bobby went up to the manager, Billy Martin, and said, I have to play. So he batted him second, which was higher in the lineup than Mercer had been batting. And the interesting thing about it is Mercer was acquired I think his first game with the Yankees that year, reacquired, was like June 28th. And he had played regularly. I mean, he wasn't a spot player. He played regularly and had not hit a home run. And since joining the Yankees, had 5 RBI in the
So
month.
he wasn't the Mercer that he was in the early
No, but the
70s.
funny thing is, he hits a 3-run home run early in the game off a left-hander. He hadn't hit a home run.
And that was Tippy Martinez, not Dennis Martinez.
No, Dennis Martinez was the starter. Tippy Martinez came in later. And to that point in the season, he was 0 for 15 with 2 outs and runners on base. But he came up and he hit the home run and pulled the Yankees to within 4-3. And then then there's the 9th inning where Tippy Martinez is pitching, and he stays in the game and he lines the base hit to left field and scores the tying and winning run. And 5 RBI, which is the number he had going into that game, and that was his first home run since being reacquired. So I think somebody was looking down and had a hand in that.
Yes, and Thurman meant so much to the team, and you talk about an era when there were 3 catchers: Johnny Bench, Thurman Munson, and Carlton Fisk during that time.
Right.
1976 World Series, the Yankees were swept by the Reds in 4 games. Munson batted .529 in that series. Bench with a pair of homers, batted .533, won Series MVP. After sweeping the Yankees, Sparky Anderson, the manager, said basically nobody could touch Johnny Bench.
Right.
And Munson kind of took offense to that.
Yeah, he did. And, I think looking back even before the tragedy happened, I think Sparky realized he shouldn't have, first of all, he said it in Thurman's house at Yankee Stadium because they won games 3 and 4 at Yankee Stadium. But Sparky was like, don't embarrass him by comparing him to Johnny. It was kind of ill-advised. And, Thurman was, Thurman was a very prideful guy. And, there were a lot of other things that, irked Thurman over the years. Most of them, we'd all be irked. I mean, the whole straw that stirs the drink. Thurman thinks he can stir it, but he can only stir it bad. I mean, I'm getting upset if that's said about me. And Thurman was an interesting guy. I can tell you that. I was around him a lot, had numerous conversations with him. In fact, one of the things I'm really proud of is that I was sent to Yankee Stadium, I want to say it was 1976, might have been the first time I ever got a field credential. And this company that I was working with was doing a set of baseball cards that they ended up getting sued by Topps and the whole 9 yards, but they settled the lawsuit. But I was sent for $25 to go down and take as many rolls of film, remember rolls of film, as I could, getting players to pose. And one of the guys I asked to pose was Thurman Munson. He was standing by the batting cage. "Excuse me, Thurman, do you mind if I get a picture?" And he said a couple of not so nice words to me.
He didn't like the press too much.
No. Well, he said a couple of not so nice words to me, and I started walking away. He goes, "Come on, I'm just, joshing you." And so he poses and he stands with the bat, with the beautiful new Yankee Stadium seats.
The blue,
Boom! I took the picture, turned it in, and that picture. If you go online and you go to PhotoFile or you go up to Cooperstown, that's the picture that they sell of Thurman to this day. And the other thing is, I took a picture with him on another day because that was a day game, and at a night game, he was standing by the batting cage with Chris Chambliss. And I asked the two of them to pose together, one right-handed, like Mantle and Maris. That was my thinking. And I took the picture of the two of them together, turned it in. Many years later, 20, 25 years later, I'm with Chambliss, and I told him about this, that I took a picture of you. He goes, "You got to get me that photo." I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope my memory's correct. So I went to PhotoFile, who now had the photos from the original company, and I said, "Can you see if you could find this photo of Chambliss and Munson?" And they found it, and I made a print and I gave it to Chris. So I saved some embarrassment there, but.
And Thurman and Chambliss were pretty good buddies, and that famous home run by Chambliss in 1976.
Munson's on deck,
Munson's on deck.
Yeah.
He has his catcher's
And
gear
he's
on,
and
he's jumping up and down. That's kind of that is a real historic moment.
I'll
in
tell
Yankee
you.
history.
I'll tell you a story about Munson. This is the earliest recollection I have of hearing the name This is absolutely the first time I ever heard the name Thurman Munson. So it's like 1969. I'm a wacko Yankees fan, and I'm listening to a spring training broadcast because we lived, March 7th, first spring training game on the radio. Mm-hmm. And Jerry Coleman was talking about this player that the Yankees had that he met that day. He goes, the Yankees have a young catcher, from Kent State. His name is Thurman Munson. And I was talking to Thurman, and I said, do you have a nickname? And he looked at me and he said, what's the matter with Thurman? Now, number one, that's Thurman. And number two, that's the earliest recollection I have of hearing the name Thurman Munson back in 1969 when I was 15.
Munson, a .292 career hitter, 130 home runs, 701 RBIs, but he had 3 straight 100 RBI and batted above 300 3 straight years in a row. 3 Gold Gloves, 357 in the postseason, and 373 World Series hitter. Your estimation, bench Hall of Fame, Fisk Hall of Fame?
Don't ask me that question. I'm a really tough grader.
Okay.
I don't want to answer that question.
Harold Baines is in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I know.
Craig Biggio's in the Hall of
know.
Fame.
I understand that.
Jeff Bagwell's in the Hall of Fame.
I understand that. He's an all-time Yankee great. Number retired, plaque in Monument Park. I'll be honest with you. I think he falls like a notch below being in the Hall of Fame, which obviously is evident by the 15 years he spent on the ballot. But that's not to say that some committee down the road is not going to look at this and put things in perspective. But look, a great Yankee, an all-time great Yankee, great husband, great father. His wife Diana, what a beautiful, wonderful woman she is to this day. I remember one time her telling me, and not just me, but in a conversation we were having, she says, Thurman's now been gone longer than he was here.
Wow.
That was about 8 or 10 years ago, and that was really, but they have the Munson Foundation. They have a wonderful dinner every year. She comes back with her children every year for that dinner, and she's a real ambassador for Munson's legacy and for baseball.
And I think what describes Munson in 1978, the one-game showdown in Beantown, Goose is on the mound, Yaz is up at the plate, and Munson isn't giving Goose signals. He's just waving it in, bring it to me, big boy.
Yeah.
That was the essence of Munson. Wasn't nothing sneaky, not showmanship, just real true grit in baseball.
People don't remember how quick he was behind the plate too, because over the year he became more and more debilitated. But when you go back to his early years, I'm talking 70, 71, I remember plays where there was I think Bert Campaneris was the runner at first, and everybody knows how fast Bert Campaneris was. A game against the Oakland A's at the stadium, and the ball short hopped Munson and popped up. And he grabbed the ball out of the air and with one motion just fired to second. And I'm like, wow, now that's quickness. That is really quickness. But tremendous player, tremendous leader.
All right, Rick Cerrone, the editor-in-chief of Baseball Digest, former New York Yankees PR Director. 40 years since we lost the great Thurman Munson. Rick, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Mike.